The waterslide incident. In 2016, Kansas built what was supposed to be the tallest waterslide in the world, a ride so big you could see it towering over the city skyline. It was meant to be a record breaker, something to brag about, but behind the scenes, people already knew it wasn't safe. Test runs showed rafts flying off the track, riders hitting the netting, but the warnings were ignored. That summer, a boy just strapped himself into the seatbelt of their car and went straight home to play some PlayStation. Is what could have happened. But nope, he instead strapped himself into one of the rafts with two adults beside him. Once the ride dropped, there was no second chance if something went wrong. As the raft hit the first slope, it launched into the air instead of gliding along the track. What happened next was beyond horrifying. The boy was thrown out of his seat at top speed and slammed straight into the metal safety netting. The force was so violent it tore his body apart instantly, leaving the adults in the raft covered in blood and screaming. People standing nearby thought at first it was a freak bump or some kind of technical issue, but within seconds, the truth was obvious. The slide shut down immediately, and it was torn apart soon after. But none of that changes the fact that it should never have been open in the first place. A ride built to be bigger and crazier than anything else ended up being exactly that, but in the worst way possible. The hat incident. This next situation takes place in 2008 at an amusement park in the US. A teenager dropped his baseball cap while riding one of the park's fastest roller coasters. For most people, that would have just been a loss. You shrug, say goodbye to the hat, and maybe buy another one at the gift shop. But this boy wasn't ready to let it go. He decided to climb over two security fences into a restricted zone near the ride's track, determined to get it back. Now, here's the thing. Roller coasters like this don't cruise by at jogging speed. They fly down those tracks at highway velocity, 70, 80 miles per hour. And once they're moving, nothing is stopping them. As he bent down to grab his hat, one of the coaster trains came rocketing through and he was struck instantly. The impact was so violent that riders on the coaster thought they had hit debris on the track. But when the train rolled back into the station, shaken passengers were met with a scene no one should ever have to see at a theme park. That simple decision to climb a fence for a $20 hat turned into a tragedy that shut down the ride and left everyone who witnessed it scarred for life. The Monorail incident. Late at night in Kansas, a teenager planned to sneak into an amusement park nearby, and so he set out for what he thought would be a daring adventure, the kind where you imagine yourself slipping past fences, sneaking through the dark, and grinning like you've beaten the system. Just you, the night air, and the thrill of pulling it off. But that thrill didn't last long. He'd chosen the wrong shortcut, the monorail track, a stretch of steel not meant for walking and definitely not meant for trespassing. What he didn't realize was that the track wasn't quiet at all. It was alive. And what ran on it wasn't some friendly ride. It was a train moving smooth, fast, and deadly. When the hum came, it was already too late. The monorail glides silently, like a shadow with momentum. He strapped himself into danger the way you would into a roller coaster seatbelt, but the only way they're similar to each other is that they both end with loud screams. The train slammed into him with the force of highway traffic, dragging him down the rail, bones and flesh caught under tons of metal. There was no cinematic fall, no warning shout, just a body broken apart as the wheels kept moving forward. By the time the train stopped, there wasn't a teenager sneaking into Disneyland anymore. There was only what the monorail left behind. The haunted house fire. In 1984, at an amusement park in New Jersey, a group of teenagers stepped into a haunted house attraction. The kind of place where the scares were supposed to be fake. Plastic monsters jumping from corners, spooky music on a loop, the sort of thrills you laugh about afterward. It was dark, sure, but it wasn't dangerous. At least, that's what they thought. The problem was the entire structure was a death trap. The walls were made of thin plywood, and most decorations are flammable plastic and foam. With no sprinklers, no alarms, not even proper exits in the area, it's basically like someone built a campfire and then decided to charge admission. All it took was one spark. In seconds, the walls lit up, flames racing faster than anyone inside could run. Thick black smoke poured through the hallways, turning the fake darkness into a real one that blinded and choked with every breath. The kids panicked, sprinting toward what they thought were exits, only to find themselves trapped in the same twisting maze. And here's the cruel part. This wasn't a haunted house anymore. It was an oven. The same people who came for a cheap scare were now burning alive, screaming into smoke that swallowed every sound. By the time firefighters broke inside, it was far too late. The building collapsed into ash and twisted metal, and the laughter that once filled it was replaced with silence. 8 teenagers never walked out. They paid for a night of harmless fun, and instead were given the worst kind of ending a horror story can have, one that's real. The Drop Tower Accident. In 2007, at an amusement park in Kentucky, a 13-year-old girl buckled herself into a towering thrill ride. You know the type. The kind that drags you hundreds of feet into the sky, pauses just long enough for your stomach to knot, and then drops you like a stone, chasing that perfect blend of fear and adrenaline. It's supposed to be scary, but controlled. Safe. Except safe went out the window the second the ride's steel cables snapped. And let's be honest, when the thing literally holding you together decides to give up, that's the time that makes you rethink your life choices. The cables whipped violently as the carriage shot downward, slicing through the air with deadly speed. And in the chaos, they caught the girl's legs. In an instant, her feet were severed, gone before she could even process what had happened. The ride ended, but for her, the horror had only begun. Imagine being 13 years old, stepping off what should have been a fun thrill, only to realize you'll never walk the same way again. The pain was excruciating, but worse was the sudden permanence of it all. Everyone else got to scream, laugh, and head for the next ride. She was carried away. Her life changed forever. Emergency crews rushed her to the hospital, and somehow, miraculously, she survived. But survival here didn't mean victory. It meant surgeries, prosthetics, rehabilitation, and the kind of trauma that lingers long after the ride has ended. The tower still stood tall in the park, but for one teenager, it wasn't a ride anymore. It was the day her childhood was ripped apart by steel speed and a single catastrophic snap. The wooden roller coaster derailment. At a summer fair in the late 1970s, families crowded around one of the main attractions, a towering wooden roller coaster that rattled and creaked with every climb. It was the kind of ride parents took their kids on to give them a thrill, nothing more. The smell of popcorn lingered in the air, children clutched balloons, and screams from the coaster blended into the happy chaos of the fairgrounds. But then came the sound that didn't belong: wood splintering, bolts snapping, and metal grinding. The train jumped the track mid-ride, and suddenly the thrill wasn't fun anymore. It was survival. Riders clutched their seats in terror as the cars careened off course. And really, nothing screams family entertainment like watching structural integrity wave the white flag. The coaster derailed fully, hurling riders through the air in a storm of shattered beams and twisted steel. 5 children were thrown to their deaths in full view of the crowds below. Parents who had been waving moments earlier were now screaming, rushing forward as broken bodies hit the ground. Those who weren't thrown clear weren't spared either. The ones trapped in the mangled wood and metal were torn apart as the wreckage collapsed, crushing them before rescuers could even react. Blood stained the sawdust pathways, screams drowned out the carnival music, and the festive mood of the fair evaporated into shock and horror. By the time the chaos stopped, 5 young lives were gone, and dozens more bore injuries that would scar them forever. And if you've made it this far, you've just sat through some of the most brutal, ridiculous, and downright avoidable deaths ever to happen at theme parks. That's all I've got for now. So just maybe skip the sketchy rides, keep your arms and legs inside at all times, and if a roller coaster looks like it was built by a guy with a toolbox and a dream, maybe just get some cotton candy instead and enjoy the rest of your